Just a little bit of housekeeping. Generally, we'll ask people to stay muted unless you're actually asking a question to one of the professionals. That'd be great if you could, please. We've had some questions pre-submitted. Most of those are tailored at Jon Bramley here, who has joined us from the transport. There's a couple more came through this morning, so if you find me glancing down at my phone, I'm just double checking questions. I'm not sure whether we actually have anyone from the SEN department turned up. There's an account called SEN, but there's no one there, so. Do we want to start with a little bit of introductions from the professionals in the room? I'll just start with people I can see, although it's just jumped around because someone else has just joined. So we've got kind of Tom Smith here.
Morning, everyone. I'm Tom Smith. I work for the Hampshire and Isle of Wight Integrated Care Board, which is an NHS commissioning body. I work within transformation of special educational needs.
Next, of course, I've got Jon Bramley.
Hi all, I'm Jon Bramley. I am just been appointed as the head of school transport in Hampshire, so just a couple of months into the job.
We also have Gail from SENDIAS is here.
Hi there, my name's Gail Moyer. I'm the service manager for Hampshire SENDIAS, the information, advice and support service for parents.
I'm not sure who the SEN is, whether that is just someone using the SEN name or whether that's someone from the Hampshire SEN department and they've just used that. If so, do you want to introduce yourself? If not, you're I just assume you're a parent and they're not here yet. We'll assume that's a parent then and they're just not here yet. John asked why we asked John because he's kind of new and he kind of suggested he might want to do a couple minutes presentation at the start just about the changes they've made before people bombard him with questions. Hopefully he should be able to answer most of them, if not all of them. Do you want to start, John? Do you have a presentation or do you just want to talk? You're muted, unfortunately, John.
Hi, yeah, I'm trying to get the presentation to work. I'm less familiar with Zoom. I do everything on Teams at the office. What do people want? I mean, I can just talk it through if that makes sort of sense to everybody. And then I've got some slides, but it's sort of quite formal, isn't it? Slides. So I just want what the room prepared, really. What do you think?
Well, at the moment, there's been no comment for anyone particularly, so whichever you prefer, John.
Okay, I'll just talk it through then, and then I can send the slides sort of later. Really quickly, I don't want to take up loads of your time with this kind of formal, just me talking thing. So I mentioned I've been head of school transport now for a couple of months. Within that time, the service itself has had a kind of reorganisation. And that's sort of purely our internal issue, really. But the reason I kind of bring it up is that one of the common feedback we get from parents is about communication, and the new structure that we have more than doubles the amount of people we've got actually being responsive to incoming communication. So from being a couple of people on the phones, it's now a team of 5 and a supervisor who are doing that. So hopefully what that will mean is that you've got more quicker responses, more reliable responses, that kind of thing. So that's kind of the main thing about the reorganisation. In terms of the service itself, I don't know if people are aware, you may have seen other presentations before, but we are currently transporting nearly 14,500 children. That's up 500 in the past 3 months. And that all kind of like adds up to quite a massive service. It's more than like £40 million worth of activity going on there, most of which is basically spent with local bus companies and taxi companies. So just that, a bit of background about it. I think a lot of the interactions we have with people are around eligibility. So is a child entitled to transport or not? On the mainstream side, that's really, really quite black and white. It's about measuring distances. But for SEN children, it's about an assessment of individual need, which means that that assessment can take a little while. So more evidence we get, the better it is, really. And I'm sure you're all aware that there's a lot of pressure in terms of places at SEN schools. So those distances, sometimes the school that is nearest and that can meet need is actually already full. So it's a bit of an issue asking children to travel further, and that's just down to kind of the places. And that obviously makes a difference in terms of length of journey, cost of journey for us. It's a duty for us, so the cost isn't an issue, if you like. We will do what our duty is, but it does all add up. So I was going to give you an example. Very recently, in the past couple of weeks, we tried to find transport for a child to a school that was less than 4.5 miles away. The child definitely needed this transport, and they got it. But the quote we had for a 4.5 mile journey was £395 a day. So it kind of illustrates the problems that we've got, really. And the reason for that is that there is a real shortage of drivers in the market. It's not taxi firms as such, it's the drivers. They can't find extra drivers, which often means, and this will affect people in this room, it often means that when we're looking for some transport to take your children to school, we go out to the market and we don't get any replies, so that causes a delay, and we don't really know what we're going to do about that. I'm speaking with my assistant director about ways in which we can really affect that at a big scale, so that will take some time. But we really want to kind of change the whole way that works. We're at the mercy of that at the moment, and it would be better if we're much more kind of on the front foot. So we're looking at what we can do there. So there's ways of getting around that, but none of them are perfect, if you like. So if we don't get an offer, what we can maybe do is ask one of the current taxis to sort of do 2 runs, but obviously that's a problem in terms of timing. It can be late, so we try our best, but we have to make compromises sometimes. So if you know of a load of people that want to drive taxis, that would be great. On a sort of similar issue, many of the children require our passenger assistance, which you might also know as school escorts. And again, we are doing loads and loads of work to recruit more of those, but we could do with more. We could do with another 100 or so, I think. And we're kind of just about to launch a big marketing project in schools about that, and then do some community engagement work. So again, any suggestions that people can make for good organisations for us to be in touch with, where people might want to do a few hours work supporting children getting into school, that will be really good as well. And then finally, I said I don't want to take up too much of your time with just speaking, doing some work with the NHS at the moment in terms of our passenger assistants and getting them trained to deal with more higher level medical needs. So the NHS have offered to do some training for us, and we're just working out what that is and working out where our needs are. And I think that will be really useful in terms of some of the children that need medical monitoring. Obviously we're not going to be trained doctors or nurses, but there are some children that can travel quite happily but just need to be monitored, and I think if we get the training in place, that will allow us to do that a lot more easily. Finally, I suppose a couple of bits of really up-to-date news, I suppose, if you like. Sometimes parents don't need our transport but would like a bit of support with the costs of taking children into school. That mileage allowance rate has always, up until recently, been 35p a mile. There's been a temporary uplift of that to 45p, but that's now been confirmed as that's permanently uplifted to 45p going forward. So hopefully that's good news. And then we're doing some work on policy-wise of converting that into something called personal transport budgets. The difference with that is it's got that element of it that's about the mileage and the transport, but it's also got a support element. So if somebody needs some specialist support, child needs specialist support that we can't find, then that budget might be a way of covering that. But that will be agreed with parents, negotiated with parents on an individual basis, depending on the needs of the children. So if that will be going into our policy consultation later in the year. We'll let you know when that happens, but it would be great if we could get some comments on that, and hopefully some support for that as an approach. I think I'll leave it at that because we've got some questions, and it'd be good to open it up, I think.
Okay, thanks, John. We do some of the pre-submitted questions. Hopefully you've been sent some of them. I hope you have. We've got a couple more since then, but we'll start. Okay. Apologies, I don't know who asked the questions. If the person in the room asks and you have a follow-up, by all means, just raise your hand and we'll talk about it. The first one was about drop-offs. Can a drop-off location be different to the pickup address? And they then went on to specify they're within about 800 meters of each other. But generally in policy, how easy is it for someone to get a pickup and a drop-off to different locations?
It's not our preferred option. Like we say, the reason for that isn't just being difficult. It's the drop-off pickup location that we use is the one that's confirmed to us by the school, and so there are safeguarding reasons why we have to have that clarity about where the drop-off is. It's not impossible to have them in different places. It would be impossible if it was miles and miles away, but I saw the question said it was just sort of a little distance away. What we'd have to do is look at what the reasons for that were, and if it's just a bit of a preference, then no. But if there's a really good reason for it, then we'll look at that as an exception to policy. So the policy says not really, but we always have the ability to look at exceptions to policy and just see what we can do on an individual basis. But we need sort of evidence of the need for that.
I have known families in the past where they have both parents are no longer living at the same house, and an individual child has managed to have arrangements to be picked up at certain days from one place and certain days from another place. That was quite a while ago. I don't know if that's the kind of thing you're still able to do.
The colleague that I spoke to who deals with this in their specialist role mentioned that particular scenario and said it's really not a preferred option for those safeguarding reasons. We really need that one address. If there's like what I just said, really, if there is a specific individual need for that, then we'll look at that. But for those reasons, it's better to have one address, so be clarity, because what you tend to get, if there is anything like that adds a little bit of uncertainty into it, then that uncertainty is about where we are dropping the child off, and we need to be really sure that we're dropping the child off in the right place with the right people so that it's safe. So that will always be the default position, is about the safety. Does that make sense?
Before we move on, does anybody have any follow-up questions on kind of pick up, drop off locations in the room? Take that as a no. So next question we got in was, if requests have gone in for September on the phone, as the system was down, when will the decisions be made and when will we hear?
Okay, I have some questions back, so I hope the person's in the room, because my question, has the system been down? Because we had one planned outage on like a Saturday night into Sunday morning, really late Saturday night. So we're not aware of the system being down. So if that has happened, that'd be good to know when that happened and what's going on. The thing with what I would advise is, if it isn't available, if it's possible to kind of then go back, it's normally back our contract with the supplier of that system that says that it should be back really quickly. And the thing about the system is, it asks all the right questions. It gives us all the information we need to make the decision. So if we speak on the phone, sometimes it's not as easy to get all the right information. But having said that, the sort of straight answer to the question in terms of if the application has been made over the phone, as long as we've got the right information, then the timescales are exactly the same. So it will be whenever an application submitted through the system on that same day happened. If a system application and a phone application were received on the same day, they should be on the same timescale to the same deadlines. But I'd be interested to know when it's happened, if anybody can sort of clue me in, because we can take that up with the supplier of the system.
Can you just confirm what the current timescales are, John, please?
We have a cut-off date, and I can't remember it now because you put me on the spot. And well, there are various cut-off dates for the various parts of it. So there's post-16 is one cut-off date, and then mainstream is another, and SEN. And what we'll do is we don't do anything on them, if you like, before that date, because we've got to consider them all together. So after that cut-off date, I'll let you know what they are. I'll check with my colleagues and find out for you. But on those, once the cut-off date is passed, then we'll look at that set of applications that are effectively in time at that point. And then we get to the sort of ones that have come in a bit later. In terms of the timescale, we don't have a date where we say we will definitely have it all done by this point. I am totally aware. I wasn't in the service at the time, but I'm totally aware of how last minute things were last year, particularly. As a new head of service, one of my major aims is to make all that a lot quicker, so people are getting the decisions that they need a lot sooner than they did last time around. But how that will go as yet, so I don't know. I couldn't give you an exact date.
Follow-ups. Unfortunately, I was typing, so it took me a little time to get. Basically, in regards to the drop-off question, Louise asked, how does this, it was something quite specific. What's the best route for them to give you the details?
Okay.
So that you can look at whether or not you can.
Yeah, our new system with having more people looking at answering phones and answering emails, we would prefer if everything went through our sort of generic inbox, which is schooltransport@hants.gov.uk. The reason for that is if it goes to individual ones, things sort of then get delayed as people are on leave. So if it goes into that inbox, we will be able to allocate it from that inbox, and that's why we've put those extra people there. So if there are some specifics, then yeah, if you can email us on that email address, that would be perfect.
And it says you're eligible for transport. It's 100%.
Sorry, Paul, you froze a bit there.
Oh, sorry. The question asked if once the parents receive their letter confirming the school place, and that letter says you're eligible for transport, is that 100% guarantee of them receiving transport?
Yeah, that's one of the questions, wasn't it? We can't find a letter that says that. So if somebody's got an example, again, it would be really useful to have a look. What my colleagues who have more experience than me have told me is there used to be a letter that had that option of saying that when the application process was via the school. So it may be people remembering a letter that existed a while back, but that shouldn't be a letter that is currently in use, because the teams who confirm the school place are not my team in transport. So there's separate decisions to be made. So if somebody's got something that says that, I'd be really interested to see it. That'd be really useful to be able to have a look at that, because that past year or so that shouldn't have been in use. So if that's still being used, then I need to just investigate what that is.
Okay, it is one of the people in the room. They're going to check it. They saw it a few weeks ago. They're going to go and check it now. Chat to everybody. You should be able to see it. So does this mean the child may not get transport if it's specified in that letter?
We'd have to make a decision on. All decisions are made on the individual children's circumstances. So I suppose it does mean may, but if the child has been through that process, it's likely, isn't it, that they'll get transport. But I couldn't guarantee it because I don't know the individual circumstances.
Okay. But another pre-submitted question before we go back to the questions in the chat. How do you successfully get awarded a mileage allowance? I have applied twice and I've been turned down. It's post 16 and my kids will not travel in a taxi with a stranger because of their anxiety. I'm traveling from Hook to Aldershot 3 times a day as they all attend at different times, and I'm really struggling to get them there, which if I can't will have huge consequences on their mental health and education.
Okay, that's an interesting little conundrum. It's interesting that it's post 16 because we I don't know if people are aware that there is a differentiation between what duties that we have as a statutory duty that are required of us by law, and then there's other duties that we choose to use our discretion to fulfill that duty, if you like. So our statutory duties, what is required of us by law, is only to transport, it only relates to transporting children of statutory school age, so up to 16. So anything outside of that, so before school age or post 16, is discretionary. So it's entirely kind of like it's not kind of a free for all, if you like, but it's what we put into the policy, and there is no legal requirement for that. Now, in the post 16 world, the way that we kind of have chosen as Hampshire to use that discretion is to support where a parent is unable to take their child at all to the college or sixth form that they're going to, and it's only for SEN children, because the limits on what sort of resource we've got to be able to deploy are so strict. And what that means is, because the question is, is the parent able in any way to take their child? If the answer to that is no, then we will look at maybe discretionary support, but that would be transport. It can't be a mileage allowance because the mileage allowance is only claimable by parents that can take their child. So the two sort of mutually exclude each other. So I know that's sort of a difficult message, but that's the way it works at the moment. And we have many pressures on that discretionary funding, and I'm sure people know that there's also a kind of at the other end of the spectrum under fives. That's a balance that we have to reach.
There was someone raised their hand, but they seem to have either left the room or just temporarily disconnected. I'm assuming they had a follow-up question about mileage allowance. Oh, it's Nicola there. Do you want to ask it yourself? You can send it to me.
Oh, no, I'm happy to ask that if that's okay. Can you hear me? Yep. Okay, lovely. So just again about the post 16, what I understand, like legally you don't have to, but legally we have to send our children to school until they're 18. So it's as though the transport doesn't marry up with the education. And to me, they have to go. But if you can't take them because they won't go, because they don't want to go with mum and dad, they're used to going on the transport. And then kind of a follow-up one to that is, like, we pay an awful lot, I think, to pay for our child to use post 16 transport, and now it's going to go up by like another £300 a year. I'm happy to buy a bus pass like I did for my son, cost me £900. Yep. We're kind of being penalised because our child has to go over 10 miles to get to the school that meets his needs. So kind of two-pronged, you get it? Like education tells us to send them, and you tell us we don't, if you get what I mean. Thank you.
Yeah. So the first one is you're right, there is a mismatch in the two pieces of law, isn't there? There's not a lot we can do about that. You know, we do, there is sort of DfE guidance that comes to us, and they try and tell us what we should and shouldn't do, and we kind of comment on what's sensible and what's not in that. So we can influence, but it's the law says what the law says. And I appreciate that the two don't match up very well, which is difficult. In terms of the actual cost of it, yeah, we obviously, you know, there's the consultation out at the moment, so your feedback to that will be very, very welcome. What I would say is the amount of uplift that's being proposed is the amount of inflation we've already seen in those costs over the last year. So it's matching to the rate of inflation. What you may or may not know, I don't know, but it's worth saying is that the amount that parents are asked to contribute to the post-16 transport is only a proportion, and it's less than half of the actual cost of it. It's quite a lot less than half that, actually. So it seems like a large amount of money, but that's because the actual cost of it in today's marketplace is really high. So that's the reason behind it. That's why it's going up, because we've already seen those increases in costs for what is being paid out.
Yeah, it's hard to tally up with, like, you know, obviously we haven't seen an increase in carers allowance, we haven't seen an increase in anything like that to kind of cover it, and it's kind of like, wow, okay, not sure where I'm going to find that bit as well, but I get that.
If it makes it's a bit sort of mathematical, but if it makes sense, our costs have gone up by that same amount, 27%, of a larger number. So actually, the amount that's coming from the council to cover that, if you like, the actual pounds and pence is a bigger number. So our subsidy is greater, if you like, because the uplift is of a bigger proportion. Does that make sense? I'm probably not describing it very well, but
it kind of makes sense. I kind of thought that was the answer, but I thought I'd just ask anyway, and I have filled in the consultation. So thank you for your answers.
Just to raise the point, when it comes to the consultation about raising, please do go and fill it out, because HCC do need to know what parents' feedback is. When it comes to people on certain benefits, if you're on certain means tested benefits, basically HCC can't force you to pay that. They will cover your part of it as well. It's worth bearing in mind that there is certain means tested benefits, and also if by paying it brought down your total household income to, I think, to my head, it's about 16,300.
16 and a bit thousand, yeah, absolutely, yeah.
If it brings your household income below that, again, you wouldn't have to pay it. On the flip side, 27.1% increase from the county council is steep for a lot of parents right now, you know, and people, obviously you understand that, but there is going to be a lot of parents out there who are looking at that right now going, where am I going to find another £350 a year from, at a time when the borough councils are sending them vouchers to go and shop in Tesco's. But yeah, that's great. We have got some other questions in the chat. If I scroll back to the top, and what the day, John, are aimed at you. So what are the team doing to ensure that our taxi drivers, escorts and providers are trained with up-to-date SEN knowledge to help support children and families? We've only been using the service since September, and our experiences aren't positive at all end to end.
Okay. All of those people we insist they do. They've all got a DBS check, just as a sort of basic. And then they all do safeguarding training. So a sort of run-of-the-mill taxi driver would not have to do safeguarding training. Ours do. The driver's job, though, is to get the vehicle from A to B safely. That's the primary concern they've got. So that's the limit of what they're trained to do, and they're not our employees, so we can only insist on so much. In terms of our passenger assistants, they do get much more enhanced sort of training around SEN awareness, and this is part of what we're doing in terms of the work I mentioned, where there are particular needs and particular conditions. We're trying to get some extra training from NHS about kind of covering those conditions. But there is a sort of we can't train them to be experts in everything, but they do receive sort of some basic awareness training across a range of the kind of people's situations and behaviours that they'll come across in the transport. I think we sort of get them in several times before they start.
I'm just going to kind of jump in a little bit because you mentioned health training, and we have got Tom here. Tom, are you involved with helping HCC with the as we would call them, escort training?
Only loosely. It is. I know. As it turns out, my boss is part of working alongside that, so he's been much more involved in that, and also I know that some people from the complex care side of the NHS have been involved as well. So only loosely. So I can't answer any specific questions, but I'm sure I could find email trails about it.
So I've had conversations with Jon. It's something that HCC, something that HPCN been looking at for a while, and discussed with Jon's predecessors and bits and pieces.
Absolutely.
To have this work done. Just because there's some of our younger people who potentially have epilepsy and they have emergency medications, and actually it'd be very useful for the person on the transport to be trained, and not only trained but have HCCs listening to give these medications and stuff, rather than pull over and wait for an ambulance.
Totally.
Which
that's
our
where
youngsters.
Sorry, Paul. That's where we hope to be heading, is to get them signed off to be able to do that.
Which is great, yeah.
Just to say, it's definitely something that's been recognised as something to go forward with.
Great. Okay. Going back, where are we after that? Oh, I think there's this. Yeah. Interestingly, Zoom has puts things in a weird order. That's very helpful. How do you review and take needs of children into consideration before finding an appropriate provider? Should be essential to speak to parents as part of this process to ensure an understanding of needs to alleviate future issues. Basically, they're asking, they want all of those involved to, from the end-to-end process, to understand the child, to provide the best service. It looks like the first bit of the question's actually been cut off by. It was from Stacey. Are you here, Stacey? You are here. Do you want to?
I also asked mine in the training.
For some reason, it's jumped. So, by all means.
Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, I should have put that question first and then follow up with the training. I just wondered, as part of the application process, I know as a parent we now fill it in online, which I did back in June, and there is a box to kind of put a loose summary of the child's needs. But I think it would be very helpful, and I appreciate you have a vast number of cases, but just to reach out to the parents by phone to have those conversations to kind of alleviate any further issues down the line. I kind of put in a complaint back in September when my son was given a taxi with 4 other children on and an escort, because I just knew he wasn't going to manage with that. He'd been out of school for a year. It was a new school, ASD, high anxiety. The complaint never got dealt with, but I kind of just left it at that, more because we were dealing with many other issues at the time. As a result, he has now got his own personal taxi because of issues that I foresaw and came to light. But that now has caused him trauma in the fact that he's had to be taken off a taxi with other children and all sorts. And I just think it's really important that, where possible, you reach out to parents in those application stages where they're saying that their child's got quite complex needs, to really understand what that means to stop these problems happening further down the line. Because not only does it have impact on my son, it impacts the other children that were on the taxi with him. And I just wanted to understand really what your team are doing to make sure that you're understanding that each application individually.
Mm-hmm. I think it's worth saying, putting that in context of the number of applications we get. So there are around about 5,000 applications for SEN transport every summer. So we've got to go through that amount of, because the other thing we can't do is to leave any of those ignored. So part of it is actually making sure we get through everything. I would like my team to spend more time phoning and speaking to people rather than doing things by email. But there is a balance there in terms of getting through all of those applications in good time, because time is the other kind of thing that we're short of over the summer. What I would say is the more information, the box is quite small at the moment. What we're hoping to do is actually kind of bring in, sort of wrestling with the technology a little bit, but the ability for people to attach documents to that as well, which can give more detail. Because if you can give us more detail, then obviously the more we've got, more information in the background we've got, then the better a decision we can make. One thing to say on that though is I mentioned the shortage of drivers and shortage of passenger assistants, and sometimes there is a bit of a balance in that, where we have nobody who's able to do it. We sometimes have to put more than one child in a car, because otherwise one of those children wouldn't be traveling. So there's a sort of bit of a balance there. We try and talk to people if we can, but sometimes we don't have a lot of choice, to be honest.
I think it all goes back to the fact that, you know, how quickly you can provide transport and give a reply, because we didn't know until the day before what my son was going to have, and I did put all that information in, and I think if someone had just read it and picked up the phone, you know, we're now had to pick up the pieces. We're in our third taxi, you know. It's just about really understanding, and I appreciate obviously the shortage in drivers and escorts, but as a parent, and I know many people feel the same, and you know there's someone on the call that's kind of backing what I'm saying here, is that, you know, we put our trust in the service. Sending your child into a taxi is quite it's a horrible thing to do at times, when you want to make sure that they can just get there safely, let alone all their other needs. So I think, you know, the processes and policies really just do need to be looked at and reviewed to make sure where possible someone can reach out, even if it's via email, you know.
Yeah,
because it's then costing more money further down the line. You know, another child could have had my son's place on that bus. We're now on our third taxi, and actually if it had been sorted from the off, you know, it's not just stress, it is money, it's time, and it's everybody's energy, and it just seems bonkers, really.
I'm as I said, it was before my time, but I know that there was problems last summer with things being very last minute. That's why we're kind of starting the process of it now. Myself and the other managers in the team are doing exactly what you said. We're looking at all of those processes just to make sure that they're as good as they can be and they're as inclusive as they can be. That's part of an ongoing piece of work, because it's occurring. I can't sort of say yet where we get with that. But it's in our kind of minds at all times that the things need to improve. Apart from that, apologise that it sort of has gone a bit wrong in that sense. But it's sometimes quite tricky to have to reach that balance between, you know, making sure that as many children, so the bulk of it, if you like, of that 5,000 things that we look at, and then individualizing it for each child. So we have to balance that, and maybe we can balance it better, but that's what we're looking at.
Yeah, I just think it's just the wider impact as well, with that child potentially arriving to school not ready to learn, you know, and how that has as a wider fallout. But Paul, I've taken up a lot of time, and I had another question, but it was more around just how transport do transport carry out regular safety spot checks on providers, because I have heard a few horror stories from my child's school or another taxi that was not roadworthy and fit for purpose, and I just was interested to know, do you carry out regular checks to make sure that safety standards as a minimum are being followed?
We don't in my team, but checks are carried out by the licensing people.
Okay.
So it's not our responsibility in my team. If it's a licensed taxi, then that's part of that licensing process.
Okay. You're on Paul mute, Paul, sorry.
I have witnessed at one of the special schools that one of my young people go to, the VOSR are there, and they have at times inspected every single vehicle dropping off children that wasn't a private vehicle. So every bus got looked at, every taxi got looked at. There is inspections done, they're just not done by the transport department. You have got a concern over a vehicle, by all means, you should be on the phone or sending an email to your caseworker to let them know.
Absolutely, yeah. I was just interested more of who it was that carried that out and whether it was done or not. And that's fine.
Yeah, all of the vehicles used are licensed vehicles, so it is the licensing authority, and they're supposed to have, after a certain age, they're supposed to have 2 quite stringent MOTs done a year. So there is an entire sequence there and a structure for checking these vehicles. Obviously, as you know yourself, with your personal vehicle, what was fine day one, and then throughout the year slowly gets worse, and then eventually fails. So by all means, if you have any issues, do raise them. And also, if you have an escort on the vehicle, ask them how they feel about things. It's been something in the past, which isn't John's fault, where escorts have known that a seatbelt didn't work, for instance, properly, and they didn't raise it and they've known for a while. And then when a parent found out, there was an argument. But by all means, if you find something in a vehicle, do raise it.
Yes, please.
Thanks, Stacey.
No problem, thanks.
Rachel, you asked a question in the chat. Do you want me to ask it for you? Would you like to jump in? Yeah, no problem. Let's have a look. I've got to find it now because the chat's all over the place. It was, yes. Have you ever considered bypassing the kind of taxi firms and bus firms and having your own fleet of vehicles and drivers?
Yeah. Is the honest answer. That's one of the, at the moment, the market is such a problem that we're almost thinking anything, you know. So myself and Suzanne, who some people met in the autumn, have some time booked to just think what is possible. So it might be something that we look at. One of the, I suppose, sort of the breaks on that a little bit is the problem is with drivers, and it may be that we have just as much trouble recruiting drivers as anybody else, but there are a few ideas around that. So this is a bit more long-term thinking, but it's definitely something that isn't off the radar at all.
Great. Let's have a look, see. Yeah, for some reason my chat has gone all over the place, so you'll have to bear with me a second. It's bounced all over. Objects. You know what, at this point, because this has just gone all over the place, everything's cut off, it's gone crazy. If there's anyone in the room who'd like to ask a question, could you either raise your hand, send it again, if you didn't feel that your answer's been submitted. It's gone, the chat has gone crazy, and I've got half sentences which don't seem to make sense. In which we'll give people a moment, because if they're typing, it takes a moment. One of the comments in the chat that does actually seem to make some sense to me was someone has said that they completely agree with the statements earlier about you looking at the needs of the individuals before assigning whether they're a shared taxi or a bus, or and I basically said that you should have a form for them to state the needs / more pressure from the SEN team to provide the details. And then that person has gone to say that the detail they gave in the existing box had been ignored in their case, and then later caused them issues down the line.
I apologise for that. I obviously can't comment on individual cases, but we do try and look at everything. It's sort of the job of a certain team. There are more people in that team now, actually, which is another good thing. So that should mean there's more time to be able to look at those. But that's where we want to get to, is actually to get more of a form-based idea where people can put a bit more detail in it. But we've got to wrestle with the tech to do that. But that's how we're kind of that's how sort of end point where we want to get to, I suppose.
And then Louise did ask a follow-up question further up. It was if we have submitted a transport request and drop off, I might have missed it, but how long until we hear, as it's a massive change to life if it can't be done? It's a long time away, September, but they now need to, they want to start sorting out the problem now if it's not going to happen.
I'll send you some dates, but like I said, we haven't got a definite date for when we'll know, because it depends what we get in, if you like. But we do have to. There is a published deadline date, and we need to look at everybody who's put something in by that date altogether. So that does sort of mean we can't do stuff early, even if applications have gone in now. We can't look at them just yet because we've got that kind of cut-off date. Everybody who applies by that cut-off date is entitled to have their application looked at the same time.
I said, one of the things I would point out to parents in the room as well is it's not just your fault. Sometimes, as people are aware, the schools specified in people's EHCPs aren't actually specified sometimes until very close to the start of school, which does increase the pressure on the transport team, and obviously can cause you some issues when you suddenly get 50 people turn up a week before the start of school saying, actually, where's my transport? Which isn't your pressure, but it is HCC as a group. The two of you definitely need to work a little bit together sometimes, you would hope.
We are doing that a lot more, actually. One of the interesting things is that people may not be aware of, because this is just something literally I found out this week, because as I mentioned, still new at this, is that as far as the guidance that SEN are given, I think there's something that says that they're actually, because what they put in the EHCP is about the education of the child, it can't talk about the transport. So I don't know if anybody knows better than me about that, but that's what I've been told this week. So we have to have separate conversations with people about what the transport needs are.
Yeah, normally we'd have Gail from SENDAS. Unfortunately, she's had to step away. There's an issue with their service. So as you can imagine, sometimes they have critical issues they have to deal with to help someone out immediately. Yeah, she would normally be the person to then. She's very good in the law, obviously. Does anyone else in the room have a question? We've got 10 minutes. Otherwise, we'll let people go back to their work a little bit early.
I'd just say, Paul, on what John was just talking about, I know from when I used to work at the council, there used to be some lines around transport within the EHCP which had to be removed, as John says, because it was effectively on review. It shouldn't have been in there. It was more of a general statement rather than anything specific to children, but I think it might have been in section I rather than F, but as it was transport, as John says, it had to be removed.
Louise, in the chat, it says you're happy to speak, but raise my hand, but I don't think you have. If you want to speak, by all means.
Oh yeah, sorry, it's just easier to do it this way. I'm going backwards and forwards. Sorry, so on her letter it says she's eligible for assistance with transport. Is that not the case? Is that guaranteed? I'm a bit confused with it, sorry.
I am too, because I was told that we didn't have letters that said that anymore.
Okay. Great.
have you got, is that letter electronic or is it a paper?
No, it's electronic. So the school's been named on her EHCP. It's been closed off. The whole thing is done as far as I was aware. And yeah, and it just says that on there. So I assumed that meant that she would get kind of transport almost. Because it says eligible for transport, because it says because it's over the 5 mile or 4 mile radius.
Right. Okay.
Because it's from, it's quite a fair way. So it'll be a 40-minute journey.
Yeah. So that's, like I say, that's not that he actually shouldn't talk about that.
Right. Awesome.
But could you, via Paul, could you send that to me directly, or could I ask Paul? Could you forward that on to me? Is that possible?
Yeah, I can. I mean, yeah, I'm happy. I mean, I know it said not specifics. Obviously, it's got all their details and everything on it. But if you're happy to have that,
we'll already have those details.
Yeah,
I think,
so that's fine. Yeah, that's fine. I mean, I've already phoned up and filled out the application and everything because your system was down. But like I say, if it can't be happened, I'm gonna have to leave my job, and I can't afford to leave my job, and I need to do about it now rather than leaving it till the day before. So I know it's not your problem. I know that's not your problem with everything else, but it's trying to juggle that I don't have a complete nervous breakdown the day before.
If you could, by Paul, if you could get that to me.
Yeah, that's fine. That's no problem. I'll send that over to him. Paul, is that the email that I sent the questions on?
If you forward it to that, then
perfect.
I don't know whether you used the workshop or participation, but if you send it to that email address, it'll come to me, and I'll make sure that
that's great.
John gets it. That's not a problem.
Yeah.
Great.
John, it might be a little bit helpful then for people if you could just run through what the because obviously you are already providing the legal requirement for transport. There was the reduction previously. It might be helpful for people if you can specify what that is.
Yeah, I'd be interested to know that.
Normally, I'd
So-
ask Gail because she will know the laws off the top of her head, and I have to go and
Mhm.
double check them because I've got older people nowadays.
So for everybody, there are some rules around the distance to school. So that's not SEN specific. So any child, if the distance is over 2 miles up until 8, or if they're over 8 up to over 3 miles, then transport is provided. If it's more than that distance, and there's all sorts of wrangling about where that distance is measured from, but it's basically measured from the exit of their property onto the street to the nearest exit or nearest entrance of school. That route has got to be safe to walk. That doesn't mean necessarily that you can't say what that is in terms of it's got to have a pavement. It's just got to be safe to walk. It's a judgment call, and there are more nuanced things about whether it's safe to walk with a parent accompanying and things like that. Then, on top of that, we have a legal requirement to make sure that transport is safe and suitable for everybody. So for SEN children, we look at that individually. So we look at what the needs are for the individual child. So it's not a case of there's not a similar kind of blanket rule. Obviously, if they're above those distances, that would normally qualify them for school. But there's also a consideration about what school it is. So if the school is named in Education and Healthcare Care Plan, that is normally regarded as that's fine for the school. If a parent chooses to send their child to a school that's further away from their nearest suitable school, then that we have to be looked into, and that can cause problems. So it's not a simple kind of thing. It may be, given the time, would it be more useful to actually come back with a whole kind of discussion about that another time?
By all means, yeah. If you want to come back and have a discussion with people about
It's just
some of the because some of that is very nuanced.
Yeah, it is.
The safe walking route, for instance. I live in a little village that has a school. The next village over does not have a school, primary school. And the road between the two is considered not safe to walk.
Yeah.
People have offered to build a footpath as part of development plans, which parents have said, please don't, because if there is a footpath, there is an argument that the road is therefore safe to walk on. So it's there is a whole nuance there over safe walking routes.
Yeah.
Generally speaking, if a young person has mobility issues, they should be getting transport. And if they have if they're at the stage of having an EHCP, the vast majority of those will probably get transport. There's very few that wouldn't. Because the chance that you have transport, if you have an EHCP and you're going to your local school that happens to be so close, it's nearly everybody, I think, gets. Yeah. If you have an EHCP,
it's just we can't guarantee it. That's the thing. I don't want to say, on camera, it's 100% guaranteed, but it's most of them by a long way.
Okay. Stacey, you have your hand up. Do you want to speak?
Sorry, last one while you're on the call, because it's easier than me go and find the information. If we're already in the system and have transport approved, I would assume we still need to reapply again before the end of the academic year for transport in September. Is that right?
Yes, but we were hoping to sort of streamline our processes a little bit and look at those ones straight after the deadline date, so that where it's just confirming an existing arrangement, we hope to be able to confirm them quite quickly after the deadline date, because that's a bit simpler.
Okay, but still go through the normal process of reapply. Okay, perfect. Thank you.
And then, I don't know if you can see in the chat there, John, someone's left a comment, whoever iPhone is, just to say, I don't want to do that. Starting to do something else. Just a little bit of it. I thought I'd provide some feedback. My son's been getting a taxi for around 18 months. We're very happy with the service. The driver and escorts have all been brilliant. A big part of my son's day is just getting a taxi to and from school with a group of other boys, and he always looks forward to it. So
great.
A little bit of positive feedback as well. Not just people shouting at you. So unless anyone else has something they'd like to ask, we'll let people go. We're pretty much on time, slightly early. Okay,
Right.
well, Tom, thank you for coming,
Thanks.
although you didn't actually get to speak very much. It's always great to see you. And actually there is that, because that health input is going to be so crucial for, it's not going to be a lot of families, but there's going to be more than I think people think, and that's going to change some people and really make their life a bit easier. So yeah, thanks for that. John, thank you for coming, and well, hopefully we'll
Thanks.
see you. Well, John has agreed to do the next parent-led as well. Are you going to be that personally, John? Is that going to be one of your staff?
No, that'd be me again.
Yeah, so obviously the parent-led, which is later on in the month. So, okay,
14th.
smashing. All right, thank you,
Great.
everybody.
Thanks for your time, everybody.
Okay, thanks. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.